This is CRM Audio, the Microsoft Business Applications Podcast with George Dubinsky, Joel Lindstrom, and Sean Tabor. This is Joel Lindstrom, and yesterday we had a podcast with Stephen Smith about learning and why you should learn and some tips about how you should learn and things like setting yourself a deadline and scheduling the test and really using the system. So I wanted to find somebody who was kind of doing that right now, so I grabbed Chris Fairfax. Hey, Chris.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. So, Chris, tell the listeners about yourself.
My name is Chris Fairfax. I'm a solution consultant, and I've been working in Dynamics for about 2 years now. And I've gotten several certifications and have really just been in a phase where I've been studying really hard, learning a lot of things, trying to learn what Dynamics has been and get that foundational level of knowledge while also keep up with all of the changes that are coming now, right? And so coming in at a time where Power Platform is really taking off, where we're transitioning to this idea of the common data service, has been really just interesting.
And I know you've been learning Microsoft Flow because you've been sending me questions on Teams about how do I do this in Flow. But so as you've been using Dynamics for 2 years, you're still fairly new, and then to learn something totally new like Flow, how have you approached that? What have you been doing to learn that?
I think it's really, especially something that like Flow, you just need to get in and get your hands dirty. And so that's what I've been doing. Mm-hmm. Whether it's inventing challenges for myself, I've got a couple trial environments where I'll say, okay, well, how can I automate this? Or, something else that I do to pick up something and learn it is there are processes that come packaged with with Microsoft modules, different solutions for Dynamics. So just saying, okay, well, this is already happening in the solution. I've got a model for how it should look and feel. Let me go recreate it in Flow. So I'm going to turn this off. I'm going to go into Flow, and I'm going to make myself execute on this in this other context and learn how to do it here. And I think that's been hugely helpful for me from the perspective of having a challenge to take on, knowing what done looks like, and then there being opportunities to learn along the way.
So you got your hands dirty, you went and logged into Flow, you started building flows, and I like what you said about how you found some processes that are currently in the application or you're currently done a certain way, and you recreate that in Flow. You had a scenario. You weren't just playing with connectors. You had an actual goal of, I want this process to do X, and then you made that happen. Yeah,
that's and I mean, when you're doing that too, I think it's helpful because you're definitely working in the context of there's a business case for this, and because of that, you can be fairly confident that someone else has taken on the challenge as well. Mm-hmm. And so that means you can really lean on documentation and on the forums as you're going through it. Being able to say, hey, I'm seeing this error message and searching that, and 9 times out of 10 there's going to be somebody who's fought that battle before you, and maybe you don't have the complete answer, but you have a direction to start running in then.
Right. So I was just talking to somebody before we started recording this about learning the Power Platform and learning Flow, and I think there's a difference. I think people who have been CRM consultants, not developers, but consultants, are used to, this is an application I use. If I want to add a field, I do these 3 steps. Where in Flow or Power Apps, especially Canvas apps, it's not always that clear cut. It's a lot of times it's more of a platform that you can build things with, but it's not like I want to generate a field service work order. I push this button. Mm-hmm. So that's a little different mindset for you, right?
Yeah, there's definitely, it's a middle ground between I'm coming in and I'm making customizations to an existing application, and I've got to build something from the ground up. I was kind of thinking about that earlier today. I have a little bit of background in web development on the marketing side, so I've got some familiarity already with REST APIs, how you expect those to respond to you, what you expect them to look like. JSON's not a foreign language to me, and I was kind of thinking about some of these things. I was like, if you're coming from purely the consulting world, like maybe you're an admin and then you become a consultant with a company and you never have to touch that development side of things, there's some things in Flows and Power Apps that are going to feel unfamiliar. And you almost do need to go out and have a little list of, I need to go and know what a REST API is, and I need to know some of the standard responses I can get from one, so I have that common language.
Yeah, you're interacting with the error messages that configurators and dynamics don't typically see.
Yeah.
You have to be able to sometimes parse through this error that doesn't. I mean, we had one that we had in your example that I was looking at, that it wasn't immediately clear, here's what the problem is. But then we realized, oh wait, that field is highlighted, so that means that's where the error is, and okay, that's seeing the value that's being populated. And to me, that's the thing. I was also training somebody recently about Flow, and the thing that they were like super excited about versus workflow is how much easier it was to test. Like, you fix it, you don't have to go back in and trigger it again. You can just resubmit the job again, and it runs, and that saves so much time. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, that's great. I was troubleshooting the flow today, and it was.
I love how you can watch the flow as it happens too.
Yeah.
You can see it go down, and oh, it hit red there. What was the problem?
Yeah, I do love that. It tells you, even if you're coming back to it and you say, "Oh, I've had some failures."
Right.
And you're going in, it tells you exactly where you failed, and you get your error message and all of that in that context.
Right.
Which is really nice.
Right. So I guess, what to you has been your biggest challenge with Flow? Like, when you've gotten stuck, what was made you want to pull your hair out?
I think it's just like, from a learning perspective, it's some of those things we touched on, but it's like application familiarity. So whatever your error messages are coming from, whatever application it is that you're integrating with.
Yeah.
And so, most of the time that's dynamics through the Common Data Service Connector, but it's knowing what you're getting kicked back at you actually means, right? Because we talked about there was kind of that unclear error message and sorting out the details of that and what it really was. That can be kind of cryptic sometimes, and that spans across a lot of the connectors.
Right.
So I think that's tough to overcome, and sometimes you've just got to have somebody who is more familiar with a particular resource than you that you can go to.
Right.
So I think that's a big challenge. And I think too, there's so much you can do in Flow. So knowing how to get done what you need to do, or being able to figure out what a particular step does. So I was working on a flow today where I had to go get a list of records, and then
me too. I was doing that too.
Yeah, right. And then the list records to apply all. And the way I was trying to do it is I was trying to go straight from the list to the apply to all action and update each one of those records. And just in my case, I needed a data transform action in there, which is like another flow.
Was that because of where you work with dates?
Yeah, was like,
dates is the thing that is high on my frustration list. Is it's just not intuitive.
Yeah,
and that's where I think to me, and again, I've been using Flow not for years and years, but at least for a year, probably 18 months, and to me, I think there's still a lot of things where we're in this weird in between, where it's almost there from a part of the CDS, but not quite. So like, the parts about like how do you get a flow and a solution? You have to create it from the solution. You can't just add an existing one. Some of those things that will smooth out, dealing with you hitting things around some party list fields or something like that. Those are the kind of things, and dates are, and Eliza Benitez has some great videos about that. But anytime you see a date, you almost always have to do some kind of a transform thing to make it work.
Yeah.
Especially when you get into like time zones. You want to put that in a specific user's time zone. We have things on CRM Tip of the Day all about that, but those are the kind of things that I can imagine are the most frustrating, is like, because these different things are like, people jump in and like somebody else in your project, I was looking at his flow and he had just grabbed the Dynamics 365 connector, which I would think that, it's Dynamics, issue Dynamics. No, you want to use the CDS connector. Oh, wait, I got to rewrite this whole thing. But those are all things that are getting much better. Like even today, the filters, the new filter capability is awesome. And where we didn't used to have that, with the ability to have multi-line and or and group field, and the ability to have groups. And I was writing one, and one of our newer guys who had just started using Flow, he said, "Wait, you can put all that in one condition and like have groups and group them by or." And really, I didn't know you could do that. So it's like every day is like Christmas. You discover some new thing you can do.
Yeah, it's true. It's really exciting to get to grow alongside a product like Flow, right? Where things are developing concurrently, and it can be tough too, because you get into the conversation of best practices, and a lot of times the educational resources that are out there for you by default don't really get into best practices. They get into, well, this is what you can do,
right?
But not necessarily this is how you should do it.
Right.
So there's multiple, like, if you're not aware of filtering abilities, there's a way to work around that, right? Mm-hmm. There are flow controls and conditions that you can set inside of a flow, but that's also less efficient, because you could take something that's part of a query and you could just pull back exactly what you need, or you can pull back everything and filter it down as you go. And so understanding that, the consequences of kind of like grabbing a huge query and then sorting it out inside of the flow, and knowing that that's really going to hurt performance, I follow that on kind of a best practices thing. And then sometimes you have to make a decision. Well, maybe are we doing that much volume? Does it really hurt? Or do we need to go and reassess how this has been built as well? So,
and I think that's one thing that I don't think the average author of a workflow really thought that much about that.
Yeah.
Where now with Flow, especially if you're connecting to different things and different tables, then you really want to. So when you're learning something new like Flow, do you struggle with the concern of somebody at my customer is going to ask me something I'm not going to know, and the Imposter Syndrome? Do you ever have anxiety about that?
I think that's natural, right?
Yeah.
It's just
you'd be kind of crazy if you didn't have any of that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I mean, I definitely do. In that sense, I think it's important to, and there's a great book about it. Well, it's kind of one of its core principles, is the idea of stepping into danger, and part of that is just being able to say, let me go find out for you. Right? And being willing to admit that maybe it's not something you know right away. And I think, too, though, with something like Flow, it's a little bit safer to do that. Mm-hmm. Also, there's less of it. It's not an old established product that people feel like, oh, you should really know this.
Right.
That perception is not there. People know that, we're all still kind of figuring it out.
Mm-hmm. Everybody's kind of at the ground level with this. Yeah. Now, what I tell people is 6 months, 12 months from now, it's not going to be that way.
Right.
So this is the time when, if you're not motivated to learn Power Platform now, it's going to change and evolve and merge more with model-driven apps and everything. But, what better time to get involved than now, and kind of stake your flag in it now, than wait until you're a year behind everybody and then struggling to catch up.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like you can move on your own initiative, or you can get pushed into it.
So have you built any personal flows that you use to automate your day-to-day life?
Oh man, that's a little embarrassing because, like, the cobbler's kids have no shoes.
Yeah.
Man, I was looking at, and like this is literally just poking around and starting to look at. There's the for Power Apps, there's like the community plan.
Yeah.
That, like, anyone can have. And so I was looking at how I could take some of my home automation stuff and start to run it through there instead of going and buying a license for some of the other, like, Internet of Things automation.
Yeah, there's some things. I mean, because it's more of a corporate tool, it doesn't have as many connectors to, like, the Hue light bulbs, like IFTTT does. But there's still some things. I like the geofencing stuff. I like things like moving files between. One thing I do is anytime I get an email with an attachment, it stores the attachment in a OneDrive folder so I can find it later. Things like that. And I think that's another great way to learn, especially Flow and Power Apps. One of our colleagues has created a Power App that he uses to track his weightlifting routines. So that another one of our former colleagues made a shuffleboard app for tracking a shuffleboard league. So those types of things, I think, are, especially as accessible as these tools are, the way I've learned it is just build stuff that I use day to day. And some of it won't be any good and you won't want to use it very long, but through that you can learn what works well, what doesn't work. So are there keeping on the Flow topic, are there any features or capabilities in Flow that you don't know very well right now? What's next on your learning plan?
I think what's next on my learning plan is something that I think is going to remain important for Flow for a while, is really understanding how you create a custom connector for yourself. So if you have something where there's no connector there available, going in, defining the API, and then creating that so that you can then use it in flows repeatedly. The ecosystem's growing a lot, and there's a lot of new things coming up every day. But there's also just a ton of software as a service platforms out there that people are working with and you need to integrate with. And so I think that's going to be really important for a while to understand how it is you go about that. Yeah,
definitely. So, I think there are a lot of connectors. It feels like the new ones have slowed down a little bit from what they were for a while. But the thing you got to keep in mind is those connectors are produced generally by the company. So if you use Zendesk, and I don't know if there's a Zendesk connector, but say there was, Zendesk would be the one that would have to put that in the store.
Yeah.
So basically, you're limited to whatever they choose to expose through it. But if you have something that, not that you sell to other people, but something that you create that you use yourself, it has an API that's supported, you could create your own connector for Flow. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So, okay, well, that's good. What about beyond Flow? What's next on your learning plan?
Beyond Flow, I think keeping with Power Apps and just that theme, I want to spend some more time in Canvas apps. Mm-hmm. I've done a couple of things in Canvas apps that are kind of fun, but I think specifically I want to focus on working with Canvas apps with dynamics in mind, and like the dynamics data model, because in a previous context I was building some Canvas apps to replace some functionality that was going to be lost by a change of platform. So that was connecting to an old SQL server that was on-prem, and so that was a lot of fun. It was really interesting, but I think, I know looking at it and starting to dig into it, using dynamics in conjunction with building Canvas apps is a lot more powerful. There's just a lot of things that you can do there by default that you've really got to there's a lot of those Excel formula functions that you have to write to do it in another context. I think dates are a great example of that.
Right.
You're talking about dates and flow are kind of frustrating. D365 date fields and Canvas apps play together pretty well.
Yeah, they do.
And that's not necessarily true when you're connecting to a SQL database.
Right.
And then everything is kind of like you get UTC and you've got to figure out on the fly what time zone someone's in and then convert it to local time. And it becomes a much larger task than maybe it's worth very quickly.
Right.
So
that's cool. Yeah, I think all that is key to what Microsoft's big bets are and the way that things are coming together. That's going to pay a lot of dividends, especially because we can embed those Canvas apps. But I still think knowing how it works with other connectors like SharePoint and like SQL, because in kind of conversations with customers, some data belongs in the CDS and some doesn't. Some people don't want to buy people a P1 or P2 license if it's a minor inconsequential app that's used by two people.
Yeah.
So why not put that data in there? Or we have our transaction data going back 25 years that's terabytes of data. We don't want to load up the CDS, so let's put that in a Azure SQL table somewhere, and let's use an embedded Canvas app to surface that within there. And that's, to me, one of the most exciting things about these tools, Flow and even Power Apps, is the freedom it gives you to connect things that aren't directly related in the data source you're in.
yes.
So, for example, I have a flow that I'm working on that does for GDPR compliance right now, and so it's got to look and say, are they on the email suppression list? Because if they are, then we need to flag them. We need to make sure that that's handled correctly. And before that, we would have probably brought something in, had to link it directly to that record, where now I just create a CDS table and dump this email suppression data into it, not really related to the people, but then my flow can reach out and say, is this on the suppression list? And if so, then process it accordingly. And that then makes it much easier then for them to just use a standard import utility to import that stuff into it and just dump it in there. So that's where, again, to me, that's the biggest eye-opener for somebody who has just worked on workflow, then going to Flow and saying, okay, how do I get to that activity party data? Well, you can. That's beautiful.
Yeah. And I mean, that sounds like something that, prior to Flow being an option, that definitely would have been development time.
That would have been either a plugin or would have been a integration type job. Mm-hmm. And it wouldn't have been easily extensible by the client, where now the client can go and change the logic however they want, as long as they know how Flow works.
Yeah.
And so that's where what would have taken probably several days to develop, we can now do in a few hours.
And I mean, not to mention the technical debt, right? Like, I mean, if that's development work, then that's also every time there's a change made to it, every time there's a change made to something that's connected to it, you've got to go back and retest that, and you have the potential to break it.
Right, and sure, there's potential, and I still come across people who are concerned about, what about governance? If I open this up and have people creating flows, was there any real governance over it? But when you think about it, how especially if you have flows that are running as a context of a system account, it's no different than a global plugin or workflow running as a system administrator account. It's really no different than that.
Yeah. Now,
whether you open it up and say, okay, everybody start creating flows that connect to Dynamics, that's a different story.
Yeah.
And that's where you might want to say limit that to business only, and then do that. So there's still some concerns about that. I think as we get it more within the ecosystem and some of the limitations currently of adding existing ones to solutions, they go away, then I think we'll be in a good spot.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, it's just great that it's built on top of the same platform, because you have a lot of that security baked into it already.
Right.
So if someone's building their own flow and they do want to connect to Dynamics, they can't do anything that their Dynamics user can't do.
Right. Well, actually, that's funny you bring that up because, like I was designing a Canvas app, and I was really going through my mind, okay, how am I going to filter this to my records so that when Chris uses it, he just sees his records? And I thought, you know what, security will do that for me. Mm-hmm. I don't need to worry about that. I'll just create it, say, show all my accounts, and then if you log in, because you got user level visibility, that's all you'll see.
Yeah.
So that's, again, just something that underscores, and that's I love seeing people go, wow, when they get this. And until people actually see it and touch it, generally people don't understand that the CDS is your same database. They really think, even though they've heard that it's the same platform, they think, oh, that's some of their database. But once they realize it's the same database and all that stuff I already know about security roles and roll-up fields and calculated fields and business units and blah, 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 all still applies, that instills a lot of confidence. Like, oh, yeah, I can do this. I already know that stuff. Now I just need to learn how to lay this stuff out.
Yeah, it's a game changer. I mean, really.
Yeah.
So
this is great. Appreciate you coming on CRM Audio for the to be our guinea pig learner here, and I think you're doing the right steps. You're doing everything we talked about before. You're playing with it. You're using it. You're not just learning it. You've set yourself a clear goal of learning this. You got to do it for your project, so that's kind of learning by fire, but you've got support to help you out. If you get stuck, you got people who know this that can support you as you go through it, so that's great.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for having me. I really enjoyed getting the opportunity to sit down and kind of talk about it and process the learning work I've been doing. I think it's just personally valuable also.
Yeah, so soon people will be saying, oh, Chris Fairfax, that's the flow expert.
It's not talking me up too much.
All right, thanks, Chris. This has been CRM Audio, the Dynamics 365 podcast. Send us your feedback at voice@crm.audio. Check out our other shows at crm.audio or subscribe on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, and any place else podcasts are offered. This podcast is a production of Dynamics Podcast, LLC.